They found Eliza Crowley 3 miles outside of town, nearly frozen solid in a ditch, clutching what little she owned in the world. She had survived losing her husband and the cruelty of his family throwing her out on the street. But a Wyoming winter, well, that's a different kind of mean. When that storm hit, it was determined to be the last thing she ever saw. If you are watching this, tell me what city you are from in the comments. And if you believe a good person deserves a fair shake, hit that like button. Her story started in a lawyer's office, a place that reeked of old money. Across the desk, Edmund Crowley, her late husband's uncle, looked at her with eyes as cold as a stone. He said, "The house belonged to Thomas. That means it belongs to us. You have no legal claim." Eliza's voice was steady, though her heart was pounding. "I was his wife for 3 years. That was my home." Edmund leaned forward. "Being married to my nephew does not make you kin. It just makes you a guest whose welcome has run out." His son, Richard, added from the window, "We were generous giving you 2 weeks. Most widows do not get that." Eliza thought of her sweet Thomas, a good man who worked himself to death in the Shichung-Liang mine collapse that took 17 men. He would have never wanted this. But Edmund just shrugged. "Thomas is gone. What he wanted does not matter anymore." "I have nowhere to go," she whispered. "That is not our concern," Edmund said, standing up. "Be gone by Friday or the sheriff will remove you." Richard finally turned, a nasty smile on his face. "You are pretty enough. I reckon you will figure something out." The insult hung thick in the air. Eliza simply turned and walked out with her head held high. She knew words were useless against men like that. They only understood power, and she had none. Or so they thought. Every door in town slammed shut in her face after that. The Crowley name had made sure of it. Friday came, and Eliza packed her few belongings, including Thomas's pocket watch. She took one last look at the little house filled with broken dreams and walked away. With the last of her money, she bought a loaf of bread, sat on a bench at the edge of town, and made a choice. She could not stay, and she could not afford to leave, which meant she had to walk. It was a desperate plan, but desperation was all she had. As the sun began to sink behind the mountains, she stood up and started walking west, right into the face of the coming night. The cold came on fast and mean, and soon snow began to fall. It started as a few flakes, then became a blinding white curtain, wiping out the road and the world. Eliza stumbled, fell into the deep snow, and felt the last of her strength leave her. Just as the darkness closed in, a figure on horseback appeared through the blizzard. A quiet rancher named Silas found her, scooped her up, and saved her from the cold. He took her to a small, warm cabin, asking no questions, offering only kindness. A few days later, while cleaning Thomas's old pocket watch by the fire, Eliza's thumb slipped and a hidden clasp opened. Inside was not a picture, but a tiny, folded piece of paper. It was the true deed to the entire Shichong-Liang mine. Thomas had used a secret inheritance to buy it and had put it in her name, Eliza Crowley, to keep it safe from his greedy uncle. Edmund had been running the mine illegally all along. Suddenly, Eliza was not a powerless widow. She was the most powerful person in Silver Creek. With Silas by her side, Eliza rode back into town. She did not go to the crooked sheriff. She went straight to the miners. She showed them the deed and promised them fair wages and safe conditions, something Edmund had always denied them. The town turned on the Crowleys in an instant. Edmund and Richard were run out of town with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Eliza took over the mine, making it a place of respect and prosperity that honored her husband's memory. It just goes to show you, greed may build a kingdom, but it is courage and kindness that have the real power. The world vanished in a blur of white. One moment Eliza was on a road, the next it was gone, swallowed by a furious wall of snow. The wind screamed like a predator. She was lost. A terrible cold seeped into her bones, and she knew she'd made a fatal mistake. This was a true blizzard, the kind that buries livestock and leaves ghosts in its wake. She had nothing but the clothes she wore and a useless travel bag. Stumbling through the deepening snow, she felt her feet go numb. Every breath was like swallowing fire. She just had to keep moving. If she stopped, she would die. Then her body gave up. A hidden rock sent her sprawling into a freezing drift. The air left her lungs, and her bag disappeared into the white chaos. She tried to stand, but her legs refused. The cold had stolen all her strength. As the snow began to cover her, she knew this was the end. Alone in the wilderness. She thought of Thomas, hoping to see him again. She thought of the Crowleys and felt a grim satisfaction that they could no longer hurt her. The pain finally stopped and a strange peace washed over her. Her eyes closed as the snow continued to fall. Warmth was the first thing she felt. It crept over her slowly, a gentle dawn after a long dark night. She thought for a moment that she must be dead. Then the pain returned, a deep, grinding ache that confirmed she was still alive. Her eyes fluttered open to firelight on log walls. A man with a weathered face was watching her. "Don't try to move yet," he said, his voice low and raspy. Eliza couldn't speak. She was lying on a soft cot, buried in heavy blankets. The room was simple, with a stone fireplace and a small kitchen visible nearby. The man brought her a cup. "Water," he said, holding it for her. He helped her take small sips. "Who are you?" Eliza whispered. "Caleb Hart. This is my place." He explained, "I was checking my animals before the storm got worse. Saw you in the snow. You were about 10 minutes from dead when I found you." The words hung in the air. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with emotion. He gave a short nod. "You have a name?" "Eliza Crowley." A flicker of something crossed his face at her last name, but it was gone in an instant. "From Silver Creek?" he asked. "I was," she replied, the bitterness clear in her voice. "Not anymore." "Yeah." He studied her, his pale gray eyes seeming to see right through her. "That storm isn't letting up," Caleb said. "You're stuck here until it passes. Could be a few days." Panic tightened her chest. "I can't impose." "You go back out there. You'll be dead in an hour," he cut her off. His tone was final. "Stay here, stay warm. We can figure out the rest when the weather clears." He walked toward the kitchen, leaving no room for argument. Her aching body wouldn't have let her move anyway. She lay under the blankets, watching the fire, and trying to process that her life now depended on a complete stranger. The storm raged for 3 full days. For the first day, Eliza mostly slept while Caleb quietly brought her broth and water. By the second day, she felt strong enough to sit up and watch him. He moved with a quiet efficiency, every action having a purpose. He tended the fire, cooked simple meals, and braved the blizzard to care for his animals. "How long have you lived here?" she asked, breaking a long silence. He glanced over from the fireplace. 7 years. "Alone?" "Yes." The word was a closed door. Still, she had to ask, "Why?" He was quiet for a long time. Then he turned to her, his face unreadable. "Because people are complicated," he said. "I prefer things simple." It wasn't the whole story, she knew, but it was all she was going to get. On the third morning, she woke to bright sunlight. The worst of the pain had faded, and she felt a fragile strength returning. Through the small window, she saw Caleb working near the barn. A thick rope was strung between the cabin and the barn door, a lifeline to prevent getting lost in a whiteout. The man was a survivor. She carefully stood, her legs shaky but holding. The cabin was sparse but orderly. Her travel bag sat near the door. Caleb had brought it in for her. Relief washed over her as she reached for it, pulling out a clean dress, desperate for a small piece of normalcy. After washing up, she looked in the mirror and barely knew the hollow-eyed woman staring back. She was a ghost of her former self, wearing the scars of her survival on her tired face. She sat and waited, feeling like a useless burden in this stranger's home. Caleb came in 20 minutes later, stomping the snow off his boots. He stopped short when he saw her. "You are up." "I cannot stay in bed forever," Eliza said, her voice thin. "You have done enough. I need to figure out what is next for me." Caleb just hung his coat and poured a cup of coffee from the pot on the stove. "And what is next?" he asked. "I was trying to reach the next town," she explained. "I will head that way as soon as I can." "The next town is 30 miles west," Caleb stated flatly. "You got money for food and a room when you get there?" Her silence was all the answer he needed. He sat across from her, holding his coffee. "So the plan is to walk 30 miles in the snow with no money and no food. Is that about right?" Eliza lifted her chin. "I do not have another choice." "You could stay here," he said, the words hanging in the air. Eliza just stared at him. "Stay here as what? Your charity case?" "As someone who works for her keep until she is strong again." Caleb replied. Winter has just started. You will not survive out there. Here you would have a roof and a meal. It was a generous offer, so generous it made her suspicious. She had learned that men rarely offered kindness for free. And what would you want in return, she asked, her voice cautious. A flicker of anger crossed his face. I would want help with the work, he said, his tone hard. Cooking, cleaning, things I do not have time for. That is all. That is all? Eliza repeated, finding it hard to believe. That is all, he said, standing up so fast the chair scraped the floor. I am no saint, ma'am, but I am not a monster. You can believe that or not, but if you walk out that door, you will be dead by Christmas. The choice is yours. He left before she could answer. She could leave and die free, or she could stay and, oh, this silent, angry man. That evening, Caleb walked in to find Eliza stirring a pot of stew at the stove. He stopped in the doorway, surprised. Figured if I was going to stay, I should start earning my keep, she said without turning around. They ate in silence. Eliza felt like she was being judged. Finally, Caleb spoke. You cook well. The simple compliment made her throat tighten. It had been so long since anyone had seen her as anything but a problem. Thank you, she whispered. After a moment, he added, you can stay as long as you need. Work when you are able. Nothing else is expected. Eliza looked up and met his gaze, searching for a lie, but saw only a man who meant what he said. Thank you, she said again, and this time she truly meant it. In the small cabin, two strangers, both used to being alone, were now tied together by the need to survive the long winter ahead. The first week was a quiet arrangement. Eliza cooked and cleaned, proving her worth without needing to be told. They barely spoke, and only about chores. This was what she wanted, she told herself. A simple deal. When spring came, she would be gone, and this winter would be just a memory. But she started to notice things. She saw how hard Caleb worked, from dawn until dark, as if trying to exhaust himself. She saw the old, rough scars on his hands. She noticed he was lonely in the way he lingered over dinner, and how he kept his distance, afraid to get too close. And despite his silence, he always treated her with a quiet respect that she found more unsettling than anger. It was a dignity she had not been shown in a long time. On the 8th day, while hanging laundry, she heard the sound of approaching horses. Her heart began to pound. No one had visited the whole time she had been there. Caleb came out of the barn holding his rifle loosely in one hand. He moved toward the front of the cabin, his eyes fixed on the riders. He was not aiming the rifle, but he was ready. A deep unease settled over Eliza. She had started to feel safe in this isolated valley, but the outside world had finally found them. The quiet arrangement she and Caleb had built was about to be broken, and she feared what would come next. Caleb's calm but ready stance told her that whoever was coming, they were not friends. Eliza watched from a safe distance as 3 riders made their way up the snow-covered track. The man out front looked about 60, with a sharp gaze that missed nothing. The 2 behind him were younger and looked like they settled things with their fists. The lead rider stopped his horse 20 feet from the cabin. Caleb Hart, he called out, his voice friendly on the surface but with a hard edge underneath. Ben Frank, Caleb answered, his tone flat. What business brings you here? Frank's eyes flickered past Caleb to Eliza. Heard you took in the woman from Silver Creek. Word is she's Edmund Crowley's problem. Eliza's stomach tightened. News traveled fast out here, and men like these were always ready to carry it. Who I have on my land is my business, Caleb stated plainly. It becomes our business, Frank shot back, when she's a Crowley. The Crowleys say she was after their family money, Frank continued, his eyes narrowing. They say when they turned her down, she stole valuables from the house. The lie felt like a physical blow. Eliza stepped forward, her anger pushing aside her fear. That's not true. Easy there, one of the younger men warned, his hand drifting toward his pistol. Sounds to me like you're calling my guest a thief on my own land, Caleb said, his voice dropping low and dangerous. You're repeating lies spread by Edmund Crowley to cover his own dirty deeds. Is that about the size of it, Frank? Frank's jaw clenched. I'm doing you a favor, Caleb. The Crowleys have a long reach. Harboring someone they want is asking for trouble. The only trouble I see, Caleb replied, is 3 men who have worn out their welcome. The air grew thick with unspoken threats. I've said my piece, Frank finally relented. But people are talking. You ought to think hard if one woman is worth all that trouble. I'll handle my own troubles, Caleb said. You go handle yours. Frank gave a slow nod and turned his horse, his men following him back down the trail. The threat, however, remained hanging in the cold air. Caleb waited until they were gone before turning to Eliza, his face a mask. I'm sorry, she said, her voice small. I shouldn't have brought this to you. Not your fault, he said, walking past her into the cabin, but we need to talk. He set his rifle down and poured a cup of coffee. Eliza braced herself for what was next. He was going to ask her to leave. She had put him in danger. Tell me everything, Caleb said, his back to her. The real story. So she did. She told him about her husband's death and how the Crowley family had thrown her out with nothing. She explained how their power and cruelty had turned the entire town of Silver Creek against her, leaving out no detail of her fear and desperation. When she finished, the only sound was the crackling fire. Caleb stared out the window, his expression like carved stone. They'll be back, he said at last. Edmund Crowley won't let this go. I know, Eliza whispered. I can leave in the morning. I won't cause you any more trouble. No, Caleb's voice was sharp. He turned to face her, his eyes blazing with a fierce light. You're not leaving, not because some bully in town wants to make you a scapegoat. He closed the distance between them. You stay right here. If anyone has a problem with it, they can take it up with me. Eliza was speechless. No one had ever stood up for her like this, not even her late husband. This quiet stranger, who owed her absolutely nothing, was drawing a line in the snow for her. She finally managed to ask, why would you do this? Caleb was silent for a moment, as if weighing his words. Because I know what it's like, he said, his voice low and rough. To be cast out. To have folks decide you're not worth common decency. And I know how to survive pure spite. He looked away. So no, you're not leaving unless you want to. A fragile understanding settled between them. Eliza felt the sting of tears but fought them back. She had shed enough. What she felt now was a deep, painful gratitude. Thank you, she whispered. He just nodded and the moment was over, but something important had changed. The next 3 weeks were quiet, but the peace felt fragile. They worked together, preparing the homestead for the deep winter ahead. The unspoken tension remained, like the air before a big storm. One evening, Caleb sat sharpening his knives, the sound of steel on stone filling the small cabin. Expecting more company? Eliza asked. Always best to be prepared, he answered without looking up. Frank was right about one thing. When people talk long enough, some of them feel entitled to act. You think they'll try something? I think a man like Edmund Crowley doesn't like being told no, he said, looking at her directly. But they will find that we are not an easy target. The word we warmed her more than the fire. She was no longer just a guest seeking shelter. She was part of something else now. The work was bone-deep tiring, but it felt right. For the first time, Eliza felt necessary, not just for show. Slowly, the silence between her and Caleb gave way to talk. It started small, with him asking her opinion on farm matters. Sometimes he'd listen, other times he'd explain his own way. It felt like respect. One night by the fire, she finally asked him, "Why did you come out here 7 years ago, all alone?" His hands went still. He stared into the fire for a long time before he spoke. "I used to be a lawman," he said, his voice low. "A deputy, east of here. I thought justice was something real," he said, his jaw tight. "But a rich, powerful man killed a saloon girl. Everybody knew he did it, but his money made witnesses forget and judges look the other way." Eliza listened, her heart aching for him. "I tried to arrest him anyway," Caleb said with a bitter laugh. "They took my badge, ran me out of town, and called me a criminal." "Just like they're doing to me," Eliza whispered. "Exactly like they're doing to you," he said, looking at her with old, deep pain in his eyes. "So I came out here, figured I'd make one piece of this world where the rules were straight." Eliza finally understood his weariness, why he always kept a rifle close. He hadn't chosen to be alone. He'd been forced into it. "I'm sorry," she said. "Do not be," he replied, picking up his leatherwork again. "Out here, things are honest." They sat in a comfortable quiet, two outcasts finding common ground. As December brought a hard winter, the cabin became their whole world. Inside the warm walls, they fell into a steady rhythm. Eliza grew stronger, learning the ways of the land and the animals. She was tougher than she ever knew. She also learned Caleb. She learned about the nightmares he never spoke of and his dry, sudden humor. She learned he kept books, even poetry, hidden away like a secret. One night, she found him reading a book by lamplight. "Whitman?" she asked, surprised. Looking a bit shy, he handed it to her. She opened it and read aloud, "I exist as I am. That is enough." The words hung in the quiet air between them, a simple truth that felt more important than anything they had said before. Caleb watched her look at the book of poems. He asked if she liked poetry. She used to, she said, before her whole world fell apart, before her husband died and her life became about just getting through the day. Caleb stood up. "Read it if you want," he told her, then walked out into the cold to finish his work. Eliza knew the book was a peace offering, a small sign of trust. She read until she fell asleep. Christmas came and went without much fuss. They shared a roasted chicken, and the quiet between them was comfortable, not lonely. Afterward, Caleb came in from the barn holding a small, wrapped gift. He looked awkward as he set it on the table. "It is not much," he said, "but you should have something." Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a pair of sturdy leather gloves lined with soft rabbit fur. "I saw your hands were getting raw from the cold," Caleb mumbled, not looking at her. She slipped them on. They were a perfect fit. Tears welled in her eyes. It had been so long since someone had noticed what she needed. It was a simple gift that said, "I see you. I want you to be safe. Thank you," she whispered. "I am sorry I do not have anything for you." He shook his head. "Do not need anything. You being here is enough." Those words hit her harder than any grand promise. She was falling for this quiet, complicated man, and the feeling was both wonderful and dangerous. For the first time since her husband was gone, Eliza felt her heart beat with something other than fear. It felt like hope. She kept her feelings a secret, though. What they had was fragile, and she was too scared to break it by wanting more. She tried to ignore the way her pulse quickened when he walked in from the cold. She tried not to watch his strong, capable hands as he worked. January brought a bitter cold that made the world feel sharp and hostile. They worked together easily, falling into a rhythm. They moved around each other like partners who had known each other for years, not just a few months. But a tension was building under the surface. She saw it in the way he looked at her when he thought she was not paying attention. She felt the space between them getting smaller every day. One afternoon in the barn, Caleb stopped working and turned to her. He asked her, "What will you do after the winter passes?" The question hung in the cold air. "Sometimes I think about it," she said, "but it feels like tempting fate to plan too far ahead." He looked her straight in the eye. "That is not an answer, Eliza." "What do you want from me, Caleb?" she asked. "I do not know what comes next. For the first time in my life, I am just living one day at a time." "Maybe that is not a bad thing," she said, turning back to her work. Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that made her heart stop. "You could stay. Here. After the winter." Eliza gripped her shovel. "Caleb, I know what you are thinking, that it is not proper, that you are just offering out of pity." He stepped closer, his voice low and serious. "That is not why I am asking." "Then why?" He was so close now she could smell the wood smoke on his clothes. "Because this place has felt more like a home these last 2 months than it has in 7 years. Because when I think about you leaving, it feels like I am losing something I never knew I needed." "You do not owe me a thing," she whispered. "You saved my life." "This is not about owing," Caleb said, his hand hovering near her face. "This is about wanting. If I am wrong, just say so, but if there is a chance you feel the same." She closed the space between them and kissed him. It was a desperate, hopeful kiss. For a second, he was still, and then his arms wrapped around her, pulling her tight. He kissed her back with a hunger that matched her own. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I will take that as a yes," he said, a smile in his voice. "That is a yes," she answered. For a moment, everything was perfect. But perfection never lasts. 3 days later, 5 riders appeared at sunset. Eliza saw them first, and her stomach turned to ice. "Caleb," she called out, her voice tight with fear. He came out from the barn, his face hardening as he saw them. Get inside, he ordered. Take the rifle. She stood her ground. I am not leaving you. We face this together. He looked at her with a mix of frustration and admiration, but did not argue. At the head of the riders was Edmund Crowley. Well, well, Crowley said, stopping his horse. Look who is alive and well. We heard you might have frozen to death. A real pity that did not happen. What do you want, Crowley? Caleb's voice was dangerously calm. Edmund's voice was cold. I am here to take Mrs. Crowley back to Silver Creek. Some valuable items went missing when she left. Fear tightened its grip on Eliza, but her voice was steady. I took nothing. You threw me out with only the clothes I was wearing. Is that so? Edmund's smile was ugly. My family remembers it differently. Now you are hiding out here where no one can ask questions. You are lying, Eliza stated plainly. Careful, girl, Edmund warned. You can come with us peacefully, or we can make this hard. Caleb stepped forward. She is not going anywhere with you. This is just you throwing your weight around, Caleb said. Edmund's face darkened with rage. I have friends in every town from here to Cheyenne. I will bury you. Then I guess we will both get used to the dark, Caleb answered calmly. The air was tight with danger. Then Edmund made a mistake. He nodded to his men. Take her. Caleb moved like lightning, his gun suddenly drawn and aimed right at Edmund's chest. Take one more step, Caleb's voice cut through the tension, and your boss is the first to fall. For a tense moment, nobody breathed. Then Edmund Crowley stared at Caleb, his eyes filled with pure hate. He promised to turn the whole territory against them, making sure no one would trade with or help them. Caleb just looked back, his voice steady. I have been cut off for 7 years. I think I will be all right. Edmund spun his horse around. You will regret this, he snarled, before riding off into the dark. Caleb kept his gun raised until they were gone. He turned to Eliza, his fear not for himself but for her. This is bad, he said softly. He will do exactly what he said. Eliza put her hand on his. We are already on our own, and we are still here. A fierce, protective look crossed his face. I will not let him take you. I know, she said, but you have to understand Edmund will not stop. This will get much worse before it gets better. Then let him try, Caleb said. And try he did. Just as he promised, Crowley turned the whole territory against them. Trips to town for supplies ended with Caleb returning nearly empty-handed. Shopkeepers were polite but firm. Their hands were tied. Soon everything from flour to lamp oil became precious. Caleb never complained, but Eliza saw the worry-etched lines on his face. One night she could not bear it anymore. You should let me go, she whispered. I am the reason this is happening. Caleb crossed the room and took her face in his hands. No, he said, his voice absolute. I do not care what Edmund Crowley does. You are not leaving. We will face this storm together. He kissed her then, a kiss that spoke of desperation and deep, unshakable bond. They had both lost so much in their lives, but finding each other was something worth fighting for. The attack came on a Tuesday night. Eliza woke to the smell of smoke and Caleb shouting her name. The barn was on fire. Flames lit up the night sky, a terrible roaring blaze. Together they ran out into the chaos, the air thick with smoke and the terrified screams of their horses. They managed to free the animals just in time. The horses were wild-eyed with fear, but they were alive. The barn, however, was a total loss. As they stood there, helpless, watching it burn, Eliza saw them. On a ridge overlooking the ranch, 6 or 7 men on horseback watched the destruction. One of them raised a hand in a mocking salute before they all disappeared back into the darkness. By sunrise, only a smoking ruin was left. Their tools, their feed, their carefully saved winter supplies were all gone. We could go to the law, Eliza said, her voice hoarse. Caleb gave a bitter laugh. The sheriff works for Crowley. He looked at the wreckage, then at her. This is why I stayed alone for so long. The moment you have something to protect, they know how to hurt you. So what do we do? She asked. He stood up, his body stiff with exhaustion and anger. We rebuild. We survive. I am not letting them win, Eliza. The fire in his eyes had nothing to do with the barn. They wanted to break us, but all they did was show us what we are fighting for. The weeks that followed were a quiet war. The rope to their well was cut. Nails were scattered on the path, laming one of their horses. Thieves stole food from their cellar in the middle of the night. Each small act was designed to wear them down. Caleb barely slept, standing and watch each night with his rifle. Then one day, a man named Frank, one of Crowley's associates, rode up to their cabin. "I came to give you a warning," he said from a safe distance. "Edmund has been spreading lies in town. He is telling people you are cattle rustlers, a menace that needs to be taken care of." Eliza felt a chill run down her spine. "They are lies," Caleb said flatly. "Of course they are," Frank agreed. "But people will believe what they want to believe. He is building a mob. They will come here with torches and guns, thinking they are doing the right thing." "When?" Eliza whispered. "Days, not weeks," Frank said, his face grim. "You have a choice. You can run now, get out of the territory before they come for you, or you can stay and face them, knowing you might not walk away." "We are not running," Caleb said without a moment's hesitation. Frank nodded slowly, as if he expected that. "Then you better get ready," he said. "And Hart, whatever you do, make them remember it. Men like Crowley only understand force. You make them bleed for this victory, and maybe they will think twice before they do it to someone else." He turned his horse and rode away, leaving his warning hanging in the heavy air. It felt like a death sentence was hanging over their little cabin. That night, Caleb moved like a soldier before a battle, checking their defenses and positioning rifles. He was a peaceful man, but for her, he had become a fortress. The guilt was a heavy weight on Eliza. "I am so sorry I brought this trouble to you," she said softly. He stopped and faced her. "Listen to me. I knew what kind of man Edmund Crowley was. I chose you with my eyes wide open, and I would do it again every single time. We will survive this together." She believed him. After everything they had been through, they had to. The mob arrived on a moonless night, the kind of cold that bites right through to the bone. Eliza heard the horses first, too many of them, their riders' voices rough with drink and anger. "Caleb," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. He was already moving, his rifle in hand, and his face set like stone. "Stay back from the windows," he told her. "I need to know you are safe. It is the only way I can think clearly." She wanted to argue, to stand with him, but she saw the truth in his eyes. His fear for her would be a weakness they could use against him. So she nodded. Caleb handed her a second rifle. "Thomas taught me how to shoot some," she said. "Good enough," he replied, his hand on the door latch. "If they get past me, you shoot anyone who comes through that door who is not me. Do not hesitate. Promise me." "I promise," she whispered. He slipped out into the darkness. Eliza watched from the window as the riders appeared, like ghosts in the torchlight. There were at least 15 men, their faces twisted by mob fury. Edmund Crowley sat at the center of them all, looking down on Caleb with pure satisfaction. "Hand over the woman, Hart. This can end easy." "There is no easy way," Caleb's voice cut through the cold air. "There is just you and a bunch of men who ought to know better than to do your dirty work." The men shifted, but the anger held them. The accusations began to fly, each one uglier than the last, all of them aimed at destroying Eliza's name. They called her a thief, a seductress, anything to justify their hate. Listening to them tear her apart, Eliza felt a hot anger burn away her fear. She was done hiding. She opened the cabin door and stepped out, rifle in hand. "Eliza, get back inside," Caleb said, his voice tight. "No." She stood beside him. "I am done letting men who do not know me decide what I am." The mob stirred, uneasy at seeing her armed and defiant. Edmund Crowley smiled a nasty smile. "Well now, Mrs. Crowley, this will make things simpler." "Will it?" Eliza's voice was clear and strong. "Are you here to drag me to a trial based on lies? Or were you planning on skipping the trial altogether?" Eliza raised her rifle, aiming it squarely at Edmund's chest. "You want me? Then come and get me. But I promise you the first man who tries will leave here in a pine box." A dead silence fell over the yard. These men had come expecting an easy fight, not a woman ready to die for her home. "She is threatening us," someone yelled weakly. Before anyone could move, the sharp crack of Caleb's rifle split the night. The bullet hit the dirt right in front of Edmund's horse, sending the animal rearing in panic. "The next one goes through you," Caleb said calmly. "Say one more word about her and find out." For a long moment, the only sound was the flickering torches. Then a new voice called out from the back. "This is not right." A rancher pushed his horse forward. I came because I was told Hart was a cattle thief, but this is just a man protecting a woman. My conscience will not let me be a part of it. Then leave, Edmund snapped. The man turned his horse. After a heartbeat, another rider followed, and then another. Soon, 5 of the 15 riders were gone, leaving Crowley's mob looking smaller and a whole lot less certain. Edmund tried to rally his men. Are you going to let these two make fools of you? We are just asking you to think for yourselves, Caleb said, his voice reasonable. Is this man's grudge worth your life? Doubt flickered among the riders. But one man, his face a mask of anger, spurred his horse on. Enough talk, he yelled, reaching for his gun. But before he could draw, Eliza fired the rifle. The shot sent him spinning in his saddle, screaming as his horse bolted. A terrible silence fell. With shaking hands, Eliza worked the lever, chambering another round, keeping the rifle aimed at the stunned crowd. A steady hand. She had never shot a man. The terrible weight of it settled on her, a line crossed forever, but she did not lower the rifle. Anyone else? Her voice was firm, a strange contrast to her trembling body. I have more bullets, and I'm done being scared of men who think being cruel makes them strong. The rest of the mob just stared, stunned. The helpless widow was supposed to be an easy mark. Instead, she had just shot one of them and looked ready to do it again. This is assault, Edmund shrieked, his composure gone. You all saw it. He was reaching for his pistol, Caleb said flatly. Every man here saw it. That's called self-defense. Besides, Eliza added coldly, he'll live if you get him help. That's more mercy than you planned on showing us. Just then, the sound of more horses echoed from the distance, riding hard from the direction of town. The mob turned, their faces a mix of confusion and alarm. 3 riders with glinting badges appeared through the torchlight. Federal marshals, Caleb said, his voice full of relief. The lead marshal, a gray-bearded man around 50 with tired, no-nonsense eyes, stopped his horse. Someone want to tell me what is going on here? His voice was pure authority. Edmund quickly tried to look innocent. Marshal Donovan, thank goodness. These two have been making trouble for months. Donovan cut him off. You came here for vigilante justice. Do not insult my intelligence, Crowley. I know a lynch mob when I see one. The woman is wanted for theft, Edmund blustered. Is she? Show me the warrant. Edmund sputtered. Well, we have not filed charges yet. Then she is not wanted for anything, Donovan declared. You are just armed men harassing folks on their own property. He then looked at Caleb. You must be Hart. I got a telegram about you 2 days ago, warning me Crowley was planning something ugly. Donovan's gaze shifted to Eliza. Are you Mrs. Crowley? I am, she answered, her voice finding its strength. Well, the marshal said, turning back to the mob, you men are going to leave now. If I see any of you back here, I will arrest you for harassment and conspiracy. Is that understood? Most of the men turned to ride away, but a humiliated Edmund stayed put. You do not know who you are protecting, he sneered at Donovan. I have connections all the way to the governor. You could try, Donovan said calmly, but the governor's office is who sent me. They have been hearing complaints about a rich rancher abusing his power. Then they heard about arson, and that got their attention. He gave a cold smile. So go ahead, tell them you know me. I would be happy to add their names to my investigation. Edmund stared, then yanked his horse's reins and rode off in a fury. As the last rider disappeared, Eliza's legs gave out, and she collapsed onto the porch steps. The adrenaline vanished, leaving her shaking and cold. Caleb was instantly by her side, his arm around her. It is over, he said gently. I shot someone, she whispered. You defended yourself. You were incredible, he said, pulling her close. Marshal Donovan walked over. Is it true you shot one of them? He was drawing on us, Caleb explained. She had no other choice. Donovan nodded. It sounds like self-defense. You two are lucky Frank Morrison has a conscience. He is the one who rode to town and warned me about Crowley's plan. Eliza looked up, surprised that one of Crowley's own men had helped them. He said he could not live with himself. If something happened to you, Donovan added. You have made a powerful enemy, but you also have good people on your side. They spent the next hour giving their statements, detailing the harassment and the barn burning. Donovan listened, his face growing more serious. "This is bigger than you two," he finally said. "Crowley has been getting away with this for years, but he was never foolish enough to do it where federal authorities could see. Until now." He put his notebook away. "I cannot promise he will face charges, but I can promise he knows we are watching him now. That should be enough to keep you safe." "For how long?" Caleb asked. "Long enough," Donovan replied. "A man like Crowley loses interest when his target refuses to break. Just be careful. A man with a wounded ego can be unpredictable." After the marshals left, Eliza and Caleb sat in the quiet cabin. The immediate threat was gone, but the danger still felt close. "Is it really over?" Eliza finally asked. "The immediate danger is," Caleb said, pulling her close. "But Crowley is still out there." "So we just wait for him to try again?" she asked. "No," Caleb said firmly. "We live. We build. We refuse to let fear win. That is the only way to beat men like him." He turned to her. "You are what matters to me, Eliza. This place, the life we can build. For 7 years, I was alone out here, thinking that was the only way to be safe. Then you fell into my life during a snowstorm, and everything changed." "How did it change?" she asked softly. "Living became something I wanted to do, not just something I had to endure," he said, his eyes intense. "I love you, Eliza. I think I have since I first saw how strong you were. I am asking you now, not because we survived tonight, but because I cannot imagine another day without you by my side. Will you stay?" Eliza felt a knot of emotion in her throat. "Are you asking me to marry you?" "I am asking you to build a life with me," he said. "Whatever you want to call it. I just need to know you will not leave when spring comes." She thought of the long, hard road that had led her to this very moment, and to the man who had saved her in every way that mattered. "Yes," she said, her voice clear. "Yes, I will stay. I will marry you, Caleb Hart. I love you too." He kissed her then, not with the desperation from before, but with the gentle certainty of a promise. It was a new beginning. When they parted, he pulled her to her feet. "Come on," he said, a real smile transforming his face. "Tomorrow we start building our life, one day at a time, together." For the first time in what felt like forever, Eliza felt a deep sense of peace. She knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. The next morning, she woke to find Caleb at the window, watching the sun rise over the snowy mountains. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, joining him. "Spring," he answered, "and all the work ahead. We need to rebuild the barn and restock our supplies." "We have handled hard work before," she said. "Yes, we have," he said, turning to her with hope in his eyes. "But this time we are not just surviving. We are building something that will last, something that is ours." Eliza slipped her hand into his, feeling the strength that had become her anchor. In the middle of the vast Wyoming wilderness, two people who had been broken by the world were finally finding their way back to being whole, together. "We need to get married," Caleb said firmly. "Soon, before the preacher makes his rounds. We'll make it legal, so no one can ever question you being here." Eliza looked worried. "You think Edmund will try something else?" Caleb's jaw was a hard line. "A cornered snake is a dangerous thing, but I reckon Marshal Donovan put the fear of God in him. That kind of man hates federal attention." They spent the day on simple chores, fixing what was broken and tending to the animals. It was their own quiet way of taking their life back. That afternoon, Frank Morrison rode up, his hands held high and empty. Caleb met him cautiously. "Came to apologize," Frank said, swinging down from his horse. "I should have stood up to Edmund a long time ago." Eliza stepped out of the cabin. "But you did stand up," she said. "You're the one who brought the marshal." "You might have saved our lives," Eliza told him. Frank just shuffled his feet, not used to the praise. "Just did what was right. It just took me too long to figure it out." He pulled a bundle from his saddlebag. "Brought you folks some supplies, flour, coffee, and some salt pork." Caleb's expression softened. "This means a whole lot, Frank. Thank you." Frank nodded toward the valley. "There are other folks in town who know what Edmund did was wrong. They are just plain scared." He paused. "But being scared by yourself is what he counts on." After Frank rode off, Eliza asked Caleb, "Do you think he is right? Will people finally stand up?" "Hard to say," Caleb replied, "but we showed them it can be done. And no matter what, we can live with ourselves." Eliza leaned against him, her voice quiet. "After the Crowleys threw me out, I figured my life was over. I never dreamed I would find a man who would fight for me, who saw me as someone worth defending. You are worth everything, Caleb said, his voice full of fire. That night, they closed the door against the world. They had each other, and for two people who had nothing, that was more than enough. The next week, they began the backbreaking work of clearing the burned-out barn. They worked from sunrise to sunset in the biting cold. On the third day, Marshal Donovan returned. He had news. The man Eliza shot was going to live, and under questioning, he admitted everything. He said Edmund Crowley was the one who sent them. Word was spreading that Edmund had paid men to start the fight. While it was not enough to lock him up, it made things mighty uncomfortable for the rancher. Donovan accepted the coffee from Eliza and said, Crowley is laying low. His reputation took a hit when folks heard he tried to gather a mob over a land squabble. Even his friends are keeping their distance. Eliza asked, does that mean he will leave us alone? Donovan gave her a straight look. Out here, nothing is ever certain, but I reckon the worst is over. Crowley knows when to fold his hand. Besides, I have been looking into his other dealings, and plenty of folks would be happy to see him brought down a peg. After the lawman left, Caleb looked at Eliza. Sounds like Edmund finally bit off more than he could chew. Maybe, she replied, still cautious. A cornered animal is a dangerous one. You are right, we will keep our eyes open, Caleb said, pulling her into a hug. But we can also start hoping for the future we have been fighting for. That future felt more real 2 weeks later when the circuit preacher, Reverend Michaels, rode in. He was an old man who had spent 30 years serving the folks on these isolated ranches. He saw Eliza and Caleb on their porch and gave a knowing smile. I heard a couple out this way might need my services, he said. Heard you two had a heck of a winter. That is one way to put it, Caleb said. They were married the next morning, with Frank Morrison and his wife as witnesses. It was a simple affair right there in the cabin. Eliza wore her best dress, and Caleb had found some wildflowers for her by the creek. She had never felt more lovely. When the Reverend pronounced them man and wife, Caleb's kiss was so tender it brought tears to her eyes. This was not like her first marriage, a careful deal made for safety. This was real, born from surviving together and choosing each other over and over. I love you, Mrs. Hart, Caleb whispered. I love you too, she said back, the new name feeling like a precious gift. Frank's wife, Margaret, a warm woman in her 50s, had brought a pie and some plain-spoken advice. You two walk through fire, she said, holding Eliza's hand. But that is how the strongest bonds are made. You will see more hard times, that is just life. But you will also have moments of pure joy. Hold on to those. After everyone left, Eliza and Caleb watched the sunset. The snow was finally melting and you could feel spring in the air. We are no longer just trying to survive, are we? We should plant a garden, Eliza said out of the blue. A real one, with flowers and things that are just plain beautiful. Caleb understood she was talking about more than just a garden. She was talking about putting down roots and building a life. Then a big, beautiful garden it is, he promised. She laughed, a sound so full of joy it surprised even her. It had been so long since she had felt anything but alone. The first real thaw of March brought a visitor. Eliza saw a buggy coming up their muddy track and called for Caleb. As it got closer, she saw a woman holding the reins. The visitor was maybe 60, dressed smartly despite the rough road. Her silver hair was tied back, and her eyes missed nothing. She climbed down from the buggy and looked right at Eliza. Are you Mrs. Hart? She asked. Yes, Eliza answered. A woman named Catherine Paton, an attorney from Cheyenne, was standing on their porch. I have been following your case, she said, her voice steady but her eyes full of fire. The trouble you have had with Edmund Crowley. Caleb stood beside Eliza, his posture wary. Catherine explained, I represent several others who have grievances against Miss Crowley. What you did, standing up to him, has given them courage. I am here to discuss filing a civil suit against him for harassment and damages. Eliza and Caleb looked at each other, a silent question passing between them. Come on inside, Eliza said. This sounds like a conversation that needs coffee. For the next hour, Catherine laid out her plan. For 2 years, she had been gathering evidence against Crowley, but his victims were always too afraid to testify. Then people heard about you, Catherine said, leaning forward. They heard about a widow and a rancher who stood their ground. You proved it is possible to fight back. Caleb asked her, what exactly are you proposing? She replied, "A coordinated legal action. Multiple plaintiffs, all telling their stories together. Your fight will be the heart of the case." Eliza felt a flicker of something that felt almost like hope. "And if we lose?" she asked. Catherine's voice softened. "If we lose, you are no worse off. Crowley already tried to take everything from you. But if we win, we show everyone that no man, no matter how powerful, is above the law." Caleb looked at Eliza. They had survived, and they had found each other. Was that not enough? But Eliza thought of all the other people who had been broken by men like Crowley, people with no one to stand up for them. "I will do it," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I will testify." "Me too," Caleb said, his hand finding hers. "We are in this together." Catherine smiled, a warm, genuine expression. "I was hoping you would say that." The legal proceedings were a slow, difficult grind through spring and into summer. One by one, other victims came forward. A story emerged of a man who had built an empire not with honest work, but with fear and intimidation. For the first time, Edmund Crowley was being forced to answer for it all. The trial in Cheyenne drew reporters from all over the territory. Eliza testified for 6 hours, her voice calm as she described everything. When Crowley's lawyers asked why she had fled into a deadly storm, she looked directly at their client. "Because his family told me I deserved to freeze to death in the street. I was trying to find a place that still had some basic human decency." A hush fell over the courtroom. When Caleb took the stand, he was asked why he had risked everything to protect Eliza. His voice was thick with emotion. "Because it was the right thing to do. I saw this woman who had lost everything but refused to stop fighting, and I thought that is the kind of person worth standing beside." The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned, the foreman stood and spoke the words that would change everything. "We find in favor of the plaintiffs. We award damages in the amount of $50,000. We also recommend that criminal charges be filed." The courtroom erupted. Edmund Crowley sat frozen, his face pale as his world collapsed around him. Outside, reporters swarmed them. "This is not about revenge," Eliza said, with Caleb's arm around her. "It is about justice. I hope this shows others that it is worth fighting back. You do not have to accept cruelty as a way of life." The story spread like wildfire, inspiring people across the territory to stand up for themselves. For Eliza and Caleb, the most important thing was that they could finally go home. They returned to a valley that was green and bursting with life. The creek sang, and wildflowers covered the meadows. True to her word, Eliza planted a garden. They spent their days working the earth, planting vegetables and flowers, simple things that brought beauty and joy back into their world. With a portion of their settlement money, they started on a new barn. Frank Morrison and other men from town came to help, a quiet apology and a gesture of support. Together, they raised the frame under the warm summer sun. That night, they sat on the porch watching the stars come out. "Do you ever think about how different it all could have been?" Eliza asked softly. "All the time," Caleb admitted. "But there is no point in dwelling on what might have been. This is what is. This is the life we built." He turned to her, his love clear in his eyes. "No regrets." She leaned against him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "Not a single one," she whispered. "I thought my life was over. Turns out, it was just beginning." The ranch flourished, and so did they. They had found peace not in the absence of struggle, but in the strength they had discovered together. After the trial, the lonely silence of the ranch gave way to the sound of friendly voices. Neighbors who were once too scared to visit started stopping by. One afternoon, a worn-out wagon pulled up, carrying a woman and a small child. The woman looked like she had traveled 1,000 miles. She said, "Ma'am, my name is Sarah Winters. I heard how you stood up to that powerful man and won. My husband passed 6 months ago, and now my landlord says I have to marry him or get out. I chose to get out, but I have nowhere to go." In that moment, Eliza saw a reflection of her own past struggles. "You are welcome here," Eliza said without a second thought. "We will make room." For 3 weeks, Eliza and Caleb did more than just give Sarah and her daughter, Clara, a roof over their heads. They helped mend their wagon and taught Sarah new skills for surviving on her own. More than that, they gave her hope. When Sarah left for Colorado, she hugged Eliza fiercely. "You did not just give me shelter," she whispered. You showed me that a woman can build her own life. Eliza smiled gently. You were already a fighter when you arrived. We just gave you a safe place to rest. Watching Sarah's wagon disappear gave Eliza an idea. That evening, she turned to Caleb. I keep thinking about all the women like Sarah who are told they are worthless. What if our ranch could be more than just our home? With the settlement money, we could build a real refuge, a place where women can come to be safe and learn to stand on their own 2 feet. Caleb looked around at the land they had fought so hard for, then a rare, wide smile spread across his face. Eliza, he said, I think that is exactly what we should do. And so they began to build. They added a second cabin and expanded the gardens, turning their home into a sanctuary. Word quietly spread that the Hart Ranch was a safe harbor for women in desperate need. The first to arrive was a pregnant girl, barely 19. Then came a widow with 3 children, and a wife who had fled an abusive husband with nothing but the clothes on her back. Of course, some people in town whispered and disapproved, but Eliza no longer cared what others thought. Their opinions could not hurt her anymore. The work was exhausting and often heartbreaking. But as Eliza sat with Caleb on the porch one evening, she felt a profound sense of purpose. It is funny, she said, leaning against him. When I first came here, I felt like I had nothing to live for. Now I have more reason to live than I can count. Caleb put his arm around her. You saved this place, Eliza. You turned it into a home. The ranch was no longer just a piece of land. It was a thriving community, a beacon of hope built from courage and kindness. Their life wasn't easy, filled with mending other folks' troubles, but it was also a life of new beginnings. Eliza thought about the woman she used to be, a lost soul walking into a blizzard, ready to give up. That person felt like a stranger now. Then there was Caleb, a good man who had fenced off his own heart from the world. But together they had built more than a home. They had made a place where hurt people could heal. Tough seasons would surely come again, but they knew how to face them now. As the sun dipped low, Caleb's arms came around her, solid and sure. This was right where they belonged. Happy, he whispered into her hair. Happier than I ever knew a person could be, she said, and she meant every word. She had been thrown away, left for dead in the wilderness, but a stubborn will and the kindness of a stranger saw her through. In that long fight, she finally found her own undeniable strength. Spring would come, and with it, more folks needing a safe harbor. But for tonight, Eliza was at peace. She had taken her life back and found a powerful love she never expected. Out on that Wyoming ranch, 2 souls the world had tried its best to break stood together under a blanket of stars. They were living proof that the meanest trials can forge you into something stronger. They showed that even in the hardest country, something good and true can take root and grow. This was the life they had fought for with everything they had. This was their home.